Very, very good evening to all of you. Just get the lighting up a bit. For the next few months, the plan is for us just to go back to basics and discuss and debate pertinent news stories. So one night a week, my plan is to do what I'm going to do today, which is basically three stories, three interconnecting stories, bring them together and share them with you and have a discussion and debate. And one night a week, my plan is to assist those of you who want to hold the council to account. So whilst I won't work with any of the political parties, I'm more than happy to work with members of the public, the rabble, individuals who listen in to these transmissions. So the plan is I will run a series of educational workshops, awareness raising, and basically mobilizing. Those of you who witnessed the last council meeting will have seen how once we've stopped engaging in the public questions and all of that, it just goes back to normal. It's what Amanda Chadderton and her mates want, where basically the public questions are all rigged with their mates and the public are excluded from attending and so on and so on. You all saw it play out. So for those of you who are interested, I think my plan is tomorrow night to come back and do an educational workshop and a mobilizing workshop. But today we're going to go through three pertinent stories. Two of them you'll have seen. One's a really sad tale, and the other two are, well, let's get to it. Very, very good evening to all of you. If you find value in these transmissions, the 50 of you already joined me. If you find value in these transmissions, I ask that at the very least you press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and for those who don't support me financially, if you're able to, then consider buying me a coffee. The links are at the top of the chat. It's the first two posts there on the chat. So if you find value in the work I do, these are community funded transmissions. All of my work is now community funded, and the agreement is we put it out for free. So that's what we're doing, and we'll keep going for as long as we are able to, and as long as I am of value. Now, let me bring this up and press play.
So, Charlie, can you talk to us a bit about the latest about what's happening with this Rotherham disaster?
Sure. His name is Maruf Hussain. He works for an NHS body called Health Education England, which its aim is to inspire, educate the next generation of medics and people working in the medical field. He has been employed since October of last year as its national lead in diversity, inclusion and participation. But this comes 7 years after he had to resign in disgrace from Rotherham Borough Council after he was named twice in Louise Casey's review into Rotherham Council, which found that it was in denial and he was at least partly responsible for the council's failures. She found two examples where he was kind of chastised by former colleagues. One you just alluded to there, he was shutting down discussion on the ethnicity of grooming gang perpetrators. But also she found an incident where a police officer who brought an idea to investigate taxi drivers from the Pakistani community within Rotherham, a major source of concern in the town and indeed making up a significant chunk of the abusers, he rebuffed this investigation from a police officer. Since then, in fact, he's now rebranded himself as an anti-Islamophobia activist. He has, in fact, given a talk to West Yorkshire Police in 2019, despite once rebuffing South Yorkshire Police when they were hoping to conduct investigations. Even more shockingly, sorry, one more thing, there is so much to get through. He even has an MBE. He was given an MBE in 2008 for work at the Home Office. For some reason, he's managed to cling on to that.
And, of course, this all comes off the back of the Rother Valley candidate for Labour being deselected, partly because of your investigation showing that he was one of the councillors who was indirectly involved in ignoring this report into the failings in Rotherham. This sort of suggests that Labour isn't very serious about the grooming issue, doesn't it?
Well, when Dominic Beck, the Rother Valley parliamentary candidate, stood down 2 weeks ago, the Labour Party told us they take all the recommendations from the J and the Casey reports, the big reviews into Rotherham, very seriously. Last night they gave us just one line on this incident with Mr Hussain. He was the subject of an internal investigation as well in Rotherham in 2015, around this time, when he was alleged to have made a false accusation of racism against a fellow Labour councillor who raised the issue of ethnicity. But it seems to me that once this story broke and the lid really came off the pot in 2015, the national conversation moved away very quickly. And the reason why GB News has been able to uncover so many scoops and exclusives in this area is because nobody's been looking at these people and what they've been up to in the 7 years since. I mean, Dominic Beck thought he could get away with being implicated in the cover-up culture by virtue of having a leadership position when the council was found to be in denial. Clearly he wouldn't, because we were on top of it. And the same seems to be happening here with Mr Hussain. I mean, in our investigation into Mr Hussain, we looked through everything that he's been doing in that period. I think we have a clip now, but in 2016 we found a clip of him on an Urdu language news network where he made some very controversial and reportedly anti-Semitic remarks, which I think we can show.
People complaining, well, Jews control this and that, but but why not? They have the ability, the financial resource and the capability and the brains and the strategy. We also should have ability.
Well, so this is clearly a shocking example of him saying that Jews have control in society due to their coordination and their organisation. I have a quote here from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, who said that in view of his controversial past and political positions, there is a certain irony in Maruf Hussain's willingness to make sweeping generalisations about other faith groups. They continued, his conspiratorial views about which rest on anti-Semitic stereotypes about Jewish control and wealth can have no place in our public discourse. He must apologise for these remarks, and his MBE must surely be called into question. Well, it's hard to know where to start with this story. There are so many incidents of controversies, past failings, controversial links. The anti-Semitic element is mad. And the Labour Party last night refused to confirm to GB News whether or not Mr Hussain is still a Labour Party member.
And we know, of course, that this issue isn't just limited to Rother Valley at all. We know that it's echoed across the country. And as you say, the stories seem to disappear quite quickly in 2015. So is this an issue which is going to keep on rumbling in the background until perhaps it bubbles up again sometime in the future with another scandal?
Well, we are hoping to do some of that bubbling at GB News. We've been running this investigation into the last year into the national scandal. As you said, it's a lot of the focus has been at the epicentre of this atrocity in Rotherham, but there have been major incidents in Telford, in Rochdale, and throughout the country, in Sheffield as well. GB News has found up to 48 to 50 different towns and cities where credible reports of grooming gangs have taken place since 1997, with tens of thousands of victims. Many of these victims, the vast majority of them, have never received an independent review into the councils, into the police forces that failed them during this period. So this is what we want to achieve. This is what we're hoping the government will push on with later this year.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
OK. So GB News, Charlie there. His Rotherham, his first of his series into Rotherham is imminent. I think it's due in the next couple of weeks or so. So what do we have here? We have this Pakistani councillor, ex-Pakistani councillor in Rotherham. The parallels to Oldham are just all the time, the parallels to Oldham are there. For those brave enough to look, the parallels to Oldham are there. You had a white politician who was forced to resign, who had hoped it had gone away, and until Charlie and his mates at GB News brought it to public attention and campaigned. And it shouldn't be for these guys to campaign. The Labour Party shouldn't be doing this, but we know what it's all about. So what you had was this white politician get selected as the official Labour Party candidate to become MP, even though he'd been forced to resign. Shamed. In 2015, 2016, with the Casey report of his role in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of working-class white girls. Thousands of them. In Rotherham, thousands of them. Proven. And then you've got this guy who not only blocked the investigations at the time, because that's what the Casey report found. After that, he's moved on into a senior diversity role. So you block investigations into what are clearly racially motivated crimes. These are racially motivated crimes. There's no getting away from it. The demographics, the motives, the victims and why they were ignored, racially motivated institutional racism, it fits every criteria at every juncture. And what this lad is now is some senior diversity officer. I think he's a program manager, a national lead. He's a national lead. And clearly he shouldn't be in a role such as that. Because to this date, he's not even admitted his own failings and his shortcomings. None of them have. And the comparison with this councillor, for me, the obvious comparison is with the deputy leader of Oldham Council, Abdul Jabbar. You'll recall, we ousted the former chairman of Oldham Central Mosque because he was a convicted sex offender. What did Councillor Abdul Jabbar go and do? Launch his re-election campaign with a convicted sex offender sat next to him. That's the contempt and disdain these people have for white girls. That's the contempt and disdain that these Asian politicians have for working class white girls. And what Charlie also makes reference to there is how quickly the story moved on. How quickly the story moved on, and a lot that was actually there was not picked up on and focused on. You all saw it last week or the week before over Christmas. You all saw the crazy media attention on whatever inappropriate comment Jeremy Clarkson made. You saw the pages and pages and pages. I'm sure the princess and the prince have broad enough shoulders. No physical harm was done to them. You know, some old guy with something inappropriate getting carried away with his Game of Thrones analogy. And the outrage across all of the newspapers and the media time it had. Yet the actual Rotherham report, like Burnham's Oldham report, glossed over as quickly as possible and ignored. And in Oldham, just as in Rotherham, and when Charlie and his mates come to Oldham to investigate, what they will find is that the cover-up in Oldham included the senior press officer who now works at Oldham College, his wife who was at the time at the Oldham Evening Chronicle, who now works for Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and of course neck deep in the scandal, the at the time leader of Oldham Council, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, who is, just read that report and come to any other conclusion, but he is a Pakistani rape gang enabler. There is no ambiguity. Burnham and his mates can lie and cover up all they want and say there was no cover up, but there was a cover up and it's in their own report. And one of the reasons I got charged by Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean was because I used the term TikTok. Arood Shah apparently felt threatened when I used the term TikTok. Of course, when I used the word TikTok, it wasn't the countdown to the firebombing of her car. It was a countdown to the election. And TikTok once again, because Jim Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, you're about to become infamous. You covered up the grooming and gang rape of children in our town whilst leader of the council. So if Charlie can go after the would-be MP, if they'd go after some Pakistani councillor, some anti-Semite muppet, do you see how anti-Semitism and this contempt for working class white girls are two sides of the same coin with these people? You'll recall Arood Shah's first first public appearance was at Parliament Square, addressing a crowd of anti-Semites. You can arrest me again if you want, police, Greater Manchester Police, anti-Semites, because that's what they are when they're waving Hamas banners. Father Phil Sumner, I think it was, from the Interfaith Forum, was next to her, as was Debbie Abrams, the MP, and whipping up the crowd was Dale Cregan's getaway driver. Yes, Marsden. Indeed, Gary. It was Carl Marsden, wasn't it? And his wife. The press officer at Oldham Council at the time. What was his throwaway comment? It's a double result. We've blocked this story, as in the grooming and gang rape of children in shisha bars, from getting out. But we've won Northwest in Bloom as well. They are disgusting, Julie. That's exactly what they are. They are absolutely disgusting. Excuse me, I've still not got rid of my cough properly. I've been unwell over Christmas. So, what we've got here in Rotherham is that they've all got away with it. And you'll recall, and let me give you an example in Oldham. It's been acknowledged in the report that for at least a year after Shabir Daddy Ahmed, that's the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, for those of you who are joining this story late, was employed by Oldham Council and seconded to the Pakistani Community Centre in Glodick, where he was selling little white girls out of his black book. Maybe the people of Glodick have a different interpretation of welfare to the rest of us. What the police were forced to admit, although no one will say which police officer was responsible. You arrest a senior member of the Labour Party in the town for child sex exploitation offences. You know he works for the council and he has access to children. But you don't tell the council. Bullshit, you're lying, you all knew, and who didn't tell the council? If that's true, if you expect us to believe that, what Charlie and his mates will want to know is, who was the police officer that made the specific decision not to tell the employer of someone that they'd arrested and charged for child sex exploitation offences, and they knew who the employer was, and they knew he had access to children, and yet they didn't tell the employer, so he could continue to access children? Who made that decision? Who made that decision? Jim McMahon, leader of the council, and the shisha bars, and an agreement, acknowledgement in the paperwork in Burnham's report. It's all buried, but it's there. Acknowledgement that they were meant to tell schools. But schools were not told, and in the minutes of the head teachers meeting, there was no reference to the dangers of shisha bars and the Pakistani rape gangs. Whose responsibility was it? Why weren't they told? How many more children were raped as a consequence of schools and youth clubs not being told? Indeed. Who was the police constable, Gary, that let the girl get into a taxi only to be raped? Who was the policeman that handed him over, that handed Sophie over? Yeah. Who was that? And she'd gone in, mate, Bob, so we're clear. She'd gone in to report she'd been sexually assaulted and raped. That's what she'd gone in to report. Who are the names? Why isn't Charlotte Green, your local democracy reporter, doing her job? Who are the names What were the names? Who were they? Who were these specific individuals? How is James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon still an MP after he was clearly being incriminated in that cover-up review? How is he still a senior Labour Party minister? On what basis is Arooj Shah's anti-Semitism being rewarded? Because it is anti-Semitism when you're addressing a crowd who'd been whipped up from attacks on a Jewish-owned factory with Hamas banners in the crowd. She's now what is she? The chair of the Constitutional Committee of the Labour Party. Lisa Nandy wrote something this week in her book or something of how proud she was of knowing Arooj Shah. Who blew up her car? Indeed, Marlene, because they are all in it together. I can see no other explanation. So let me show you something. I just need to bring it up. This is Councillor Liam Billington. Tameside councillor. Comes on here every now and then. Decent guy. One of the few councillors brave enough to openly communicate with me. Would not surprise me if this is more widespread. When I questioned grooming in Tameside, I was requested to go to Ashton Police Station. That's the place where DS Dean and his bent mates are all based. He was requested to go to Ashton Police Station and explain myself to the police, even though I had used council data. Request for interview came from someone in the council. What Liam is claiming there, and this is a picture of Liam, and let me bring him up so you can see his Twitter profile. You should all follow him. What Liam is claiming there, and this is a Conservative councillor, is when he raised the issue of the grooming gangs in Tameside, and I'll get onto that in a second. When he raised the issue of the grooming gangs in Tameside, some senior councillor, a council officer from Tameside Council, remember this is Angela Rayner's backyard, some senior councillor went on to contact the police, and the police phoned him up basically wanting to arrest him, telling him to come to the police station or else. A senior councillor asking questions on data he'd obtained from the council, threatened by Greater Manchester Police for raising to ask about the grooming and gang rape of children in Tameside. And that police officer's name, because I'm not interested in hiding any of this, that police officer's name is Chief Superintendent Rob Cousins. Chief Superintendent Rob Cousins. That's how bent all of this is. A chief superintendent contacts a democratically elected politician and tries to intimidate him into silence for raising concerns of the grooming and gang rape of children in Tameside. And so we're specific. This is children in Ashton who are linked to the taxi ranks and the exploitation through the taxi ranks, which we now know is a model well used across the country. and also in Hyde linked to the takeaways. They went after a democratically elected councillor for daring to ask questions. And the data I've seen for Tameside is at least comparable to the data in Oldham. They're trying to cover it up in Tameside, just as they tried to cover up in Oldham, just as they tried to cover up in Manchester, just as they tried to cover up in Rochdale. Yes, Denise. Dr. Carolyn Wilkins and her entire leadership team resigned. Denise, let's be clear. Dr. Carolyn Wilkins, Boobgate, and the other one, all of them resigned. Mate, the police have got evidence of CSE in Tameside. The data is older. Just as the data is older in Oldham. Remember, in Oldham, there's still, to this day, Amanda Chadderton will not confirm how many of our children were groomed and gang raped and sold. I'll tell you what's wrong with these people, Julie. And this is where I take it, and they all hate it for it. They are protecting the block vote. And they have harvested an environment where any of us who speak out can be condemned as far right. Which is where I want to move on to. Just give me one moment. Very, very sorry story, this. Many of us supported Ellie. We read the stories and we are horrified. It turns out she made a whole host of false claims. Took a claw hammer to herself. Sent herself text messages. Posted fake accounts of her ordeal on social media. Increased community tensions, apparently, because the far right turned up. And that's why we've been very fortunate in Oldham, because we've led the campaign. And they've called us far right because of it. Because we've led the campaign, there's been no space for the far right to turn up here. But now the police are happy to talk. You know where before they're not happy to talk? And by the way, in Cumbria, the police are incriminated in failing victims the same as everywhere else. Simon Fell, the Tory MP for Barrow and Furness, said the case had fueled racism in the town and had led to the far-right group Patriotic Alternative beginning campaigning. Now, will we finish Patriotic Alternative off in an afternoon? Simon. Because we embraced it. And then actually it's unfair. Because Ellie's family were very clear they wanted nothing to do with any of the far-right. Consistently, they've been very clear. They were trying to support the sister, the daughter, the nephew, the niece, what, you know. And they were very clear. They did not entertain the far-right. Justice for Ellie campaign. I think what this is a very sorry story of a girl, of a young girl that needs help. I don't think she's well at all. I'm reading this and it's clear she's not well. I think it's clear she's not mentally well. A local Asian businessman was accused of being the ringleader. It's clear from reading this he did no such thing. She also hijacked the social media accounts of random unsuspecting men she met online in order to manipulate messages and make it appear as she was being groomed. One of these was this poor lad, supermarket worker from Essex, who was arrested and put on remand. He was locked up. As detectives investigated her accounts, they found evidence that Williams had not only lied, but had concocted evidence to support her allegations, including creating fake Snapchat accounts and inflicting injuries on herself. And that photograph of her is apparently one of the injuries she inflicted on herself with a hammer, with a claw hammer. So, what's took place there? It's almost immediately. And I've been watching and following. Those that it politically suits, I've tried to use this one case where all the thousands of others of victims are true, are jumping on this and jumping on the far right and jumping on the victims, are somehow not victims. Nazir Afzal, is that a go? I think he's got political ambitions, by the way. I increasingly I'm developing a dislike for Mr. Nazir Afzal. Making reference to the far right. They use the spectre of the far right to stop us having these conversations and debates. And now this has happened. They say, see, community tensions, the far right. No, listen. Listen to me very clearly. Long before Ellie came along, there are many, many children across the north of England, thousands across the north of England, who are groomed and gang raped and trafficked by Pakistani rape gangs. And the reason so many of us supported this child was not because we are far right or racists. Is because we want to protect our children, and we would have done likewise if this child was Asian or Indian or Sikh or any of the others. I'm sure there is more to this story, Sally, but it's not, and I'll be clear with you, it's not a grooming gang story. So let that go. There is more to this story, and I think this is a story of a very unwell young woman. And she has done immense damage to all of the legitimate victims that are out there. And what you'll see, those fake liberals now, and those with those political motives to try and cover this up, they will use this story repeatedly to try and silence all of the legitimate victims and use it to stir up the far right stuff. And that's a shame. I think that's a shame for all of us, and that's a shame for the victims of CSE in Barrow, of which there are hundreds. Or 100 sort of crimes. If you look on the internet, you'll see the police's own stats. So that's the three stories I wanted to bring up. The Ellie story. It's a sad, sad story. The Rotherham story. But most importantly, I wanted to raise with you, I think most importantly for us, what's currently going on in Tameside, and how Greater Manchester Police and Tameside Council are attempted to intimidate a democratically elected politician from asking questions, legitimate questions, of data provided to him by the authorities of child sex exploitation, rape gangs in Ashton, in Hyde, and across Tameside. think it's anything that complicated, Bob. About Ellie's mum being something to do with Labour. She's a politician, but I don't think it's anything to do with that. Of her discrediting real victims like that. I think it's just an unwell child. I think the story here, more than her fantasies and what she's made up, or more than her mental health condition, because I think it is a mental health condition if you do this to yourself. I think more than that was how the battle lines were immediately drawn between the authorities and the public who knew that these cases were real. Irrespective of what happened to Ellie, what happened elsewhere and elsewhere and elsewhere, these cases are real. And what's going to be very interesting now is how you will see those who never spoke about the convictions in Keighley or Bradford or Oldham or Rotherham suddenly jump on Ellie and try and spin it as a far-right conspiracy and children making things up and all of that. And I think we need to remain brave and strong and resolute, because irrespective of what has happened with this young woman, what's happening closer to home should worry all of us. There is a cover-up in Oldham. A councillor has been intimidated. A democratically elected politician has been intimidated by Greater Manchester Police. Essentially threatened. And then those who've been rewarded in Rotherham, because the story of Rotherham was one about, and not only did they do this, they then got rewarded for it. Well, come to Oldham. Come to Oldham. You'll find many a politician and many a council officer that were rewarded for it. The Director of Children's Services. Remember, he, and he's in the report, named in the report, he's not named, but his position's there, so you know who it is, named in the report, Gerard Jones, blocked victims from giving evidence. Jim McMahon sent his press officer the press officer's wife now works for Angela Rayner. At the time, she worked at the local newspaper, the Oldham Chronicle, helping to cover this up. Time and time again, these people are rewarded. He's now the Minister for Sewage, isn't he, McMahon? The Shadow Minister for Sewage. Okay, that's me done for today. I'll come back tomorrow. Tomorrow is specifically for people who want to campaign, who are willing to listen, willing to be coordinated on social media, in letters to the council, and so on, and raise awareness and campaign as a pressure group. I'm not interested in politics per se. I'm interested in holding these people to account. In an ideal world, I'd have somewhere between 50 and 100 of you working in a coordinated manner and accepting that perhaps I know what I'm doing and following instructions and learning. So that's what I'm interested in tomorrow, and those of you who are interested in going on that journey with me, and you'll see what we'll do. We will cause havoc. If you're interested in that, join me tomorrow, because after tomorrow we'll make into a private group with some private invitations, Zoom-type meetings, and we'll do to Amanda Chadderton and the Labour Party Council. Well, whatever we've done so far, it will be amplified tenfold. So that's the plan of what I want to do. And if you want to go on that journey with me, I'll see you tomorrow. And to all of my counsellor friends who watch these transmissions but cowardly never say anything, enjoy May's election, lads. Enjoy May's election. A very, very good evening to all of you.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.